Hi guys, how are you today? Hope you are enjoying your day. It's awful windy outside, but my dogs won't come in off the deck. They are loving the wind. So, anyway, I thought I would read some chapters to you from Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library. So, here is chapter 5, Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library. Eating lunch in the cafeteria, Kyle stared at his wilted fish sticks, wishing he could pull a magic take another turn card out of thin air. I blew it, he mumbled. Yep, Akimi agreed. You basically did. Can you imagine how awesome that new library is going to be if Mr. Lemoncello and his imagination factory guys had anything to do with it? Yes, I can, and I'm kind of hoping I get to see it too. After all, I wrote a real essay, not one sentence about balloons. Thanks. Rub it in. Akimi eased up a little. Hey, Kyle, when you're playing a game like Sorry and you get bumped back 3 spaces, do you usually quit? No. If I get bumped, I play harder because I know I need to find a way to get back those 3 spaces and pull ahead of the pack. Hey, guys! Miguel Fernandez carried his tray over to join Kyle and Akimi. He was followed by a kid with spiky hair and glasses the size of welder goggles. You two know Andrew Puckelman, right? Hey, said Kyle and Akimi. Hello. Andrew is one of my top library aides, said Miguel. Cool, said Akimi. Mrs. Youngins, the librarian, just confirmed that Mr. Lemoncello is the top secret benefactor who donated all the money to build the new public library. $500 million. She heard it on NPR, added Puckelman, who more or less talked through his nose. So we did some primary source research on Mr. Lemoncello and his connection to Alexandriaville. What'd you find out? Asked Kyle. First off, said Miguel, he was born here. He had 9 brothers and sisters, Andrew added. All of them crammed into a tiny apartment with only 1 bathroom over in Little Italy, said Miguel. And, said Puckelman, sounding like he wanted to one-up Miguel, he loved the old public library down on Market Street. He used to go there when he was a kid and needed a quiet place to think and doodle his ideas. And get this, Miguel said eagerly. Mrs. Tobin, the librarian back then, took an interest in little Luigi, even though he was just, a kid like us. She kept the library open late on some nights and let him borrow junk from her desk or her purse, thimbles and thumbtacks and glue bottles, even red Barbie doll shoes, stuff he used for game pieces so he could map out his first ideas on a library table. Then, Andrew jumped in, Then Mrs. Tobin took Mr. Lemoncello's sketch for Family Frenzy home to her husband who ran a print shop. They signed some papers, created a company, and within a couple of years they were all millionaires. But Miguel had the last word. Now, of course, Mr. Lemoncello is a bazillionaire. What are you 4 nerds so excited about? Said Haley Daly as she waltzed past with a gaggle of popular girls in her royal court. Haley was the princess of the 7th grade. Blonde hair, blue eyes, blazingly bright smile. She looked like a walking toothpaste commercial. We're pumped about Mr. Lemoncello, said Miguel. And the new library, said Andrew. And, said Kyle melodramatically, just seeing you, Haley. You are so immature. Come on, girls. Haley and her friends flounced away to the cool kids' table. Check it out, said Akimi, gesturing toward the cafeteria food line, where Charles Chiltington was balancing 2 trays, his own and one for Mrs. Cameron. I'm so glad you have lunchroom duty today, Mrs. Cameron, Kyle heard Chiltington say. If you don't mind, I have a few questions about how conventions within genres, such as poetry, drama, or essays, can affect meaning. Well, Charles, I'd be happy to discuss that with you. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Cameron, and may I say that sweater certainly complements your eye color. What a suck-up, mumbled Akimi. Chiltington's trying to use his weaselly charm to make sure Mrs. C sends his essay up the line to Mr. Lemoncello. Don't worry, said Kyle. Mrs. Cameron isn't the final judge. Mr. Lemoncello is, and since he is a genius, he will definitely pick the essay you guys all wrote. Undoubtedly, said Peckelman. Thanks, Kyle, said Miguel. I just wish you could win with us, said Akimi. Well, maybe I can. Like you said, this is just a move back 3 spaces card. Take a walk on the boardwalk when someone else owns it. It's a shoot and chutes and ladders. A detour to the molasses swamp in Candyland. Yo, Kyle, said Miguel, exactly how many board games have you played? Enough to know that you don't ever quit until somebody else actually wins. He picked up his lunch and headed for the dirty tray window. Akimi called after him, Where are you going? I have the rest of lunch and all of study hall to work on a new essay. But Mrs. Cameron won't take it. Maybe, but I've got to roll the dice one more time. Maybe I'll get lucky. I hope so, said Akimi. Me too. See you guys on the bus. Chapter 6. Working on his library essay like he'd never worked on an essay in his whole essay writing life, Kyle crafted a killer thesis sentence that compared libraries to his favorite games. Using a library can make learning about anything and everything fun, he wrote. When you're in a library researching a topic, you're on a scavenger hunt, looking for clues and prizes and books instead of your attic or backyard. He put in points and subpoints. He wrapped everything up with a tidy conclusion. He even checked his spelling, twice. But Akimi had been right. I'm sorry, Kyle, Mrs. Cameron said when he handed her his new paper at the end of the day. This is very good, and I am impressed by your extra effort. However, the deadline was this morning. Rules are rules, the same as they are in all the board games you mentioned in your essay. She basically handed Kyle a go back 500 spaces card. But Kyle refused to give up. He remembered how his mother had written to Mr. Lemoncello's Imagination Factory when he and his brothers needed a fresh set of clue cards for the indoor-outdoor scavenger hunt. Maybe he could send his essay directly to Mr. Lemoncello via email. Maybe if the game maker wasn't judging the essays until later that night, Kyle still had a shot. A long shot, but hey, sometimes the long ones were the only shots you got. The second he hit home, he sat down at his mother's kitchen computer. He attached his essay file to a high-priority email addressed to Mr. Lemoncello at the Imagination Factory. What are you doing, Kyle? His mom asked when she came into the room and found him typing on her computer. Some extra credit homework. Extra credit? School's out at the end of this week. So, you're not playing my Diner Dash game, are you? No, Mom, it's an essay about Mr. Lemoncello's amazing new library downtown. Oh, sounds interesting. I heard on the radio that there's going to be a gala grand opening reception this Friday night at the Parker House Hotel, right across the street from the old bank building. I mean, the new library. Kyle typed in a P.S. to his email. I hope at the party on Friday you have balloons. Then he hit send. Who did you send your essay to? His mother asked. Your teacher? No, Mr. Lemoncello himself. It took some digging, but I found his email address on his game company's website. Really? I'm impressed. His mom rubbed his hair. You know, this morning I said to your dad, Kyle can be just as smart as Curtis and just as focused as Mike when he puts his mind to it. Kyle smiled. Thanks, Mom. But his smile quickly disappeared when a bong alerted him to an incoming email from Mr. Lemoncello. It was an auto-response form letter. Dear Lemoncello game lover, this is a no-reply mailbox. Your message did not go through. Do not try to resend it or you'll just hear another bong, but thank you for playing our games. Chapter 7. Heading back to school on Tuesday, Kyle knew he had to put on a brave face. He smiled as he walked with his class toward the auditorium for a special early morning assembly, the one where Mr. Luigi L. Lemoncello himself would announce the winners of the library lock-in essay contest. I hope he picked yours, Kyle whispered to Akimi. Thanks, I do too, but the lock-in won't be as much fun without you. Well, when it's over and the library is officially open, you can take me on a tour. That's exactly what I'm going to do, if I win. If you don't, I'm sending a flaming squirrel after Mrs. Cameron. For this assembly, the seventh graders, most of whom were 12 years old, were told to sit in the front rows close to the stage. That made Kyle feel a little better. At least he'd get a chance to see Mr. Lemoncello up close and personal. But his hero wasn't even on stage. Just as the principal, the school librarian, Mrs. Youngins, and a red-headed woman in high-heeled shoes who Kyle didn't recognize. She sat up straight like someone had slipped a yardstick down the back of her bright red business suit. Her glasses were bright red, too. "That's Dr. Yanina Zinchenko," gushed Miguel Fernandez, who was sitting on Kyle's right. "Who's she?" asked Akimi, seated to Kyle's left. "Just the most famous librarian in the whole wide world." "All right, boys and girls," said the principal at the podium. "Settle down. Quiet, please. It is my great honor to introduce the head librarian for the new Alexandriaville Public Library, Dr. Yanina Zinchenko." Everybody clapped. The tall lady in the red outfit strode to the microphone. "Good morning." Her voice was breathy with just a hint of a Russian accent. 12 years ago, this town lost its one and only public library when it was torn down to make room for an elevated parking garage. But back then, many said the internet had rendered the old-fashioned library obsolete, that a new parking garage would attract shoppers and boutiques and dress shops near the old bank building. But the library's demolition also meant that those of you who are now 12 years old have lived your entire lives without a public library. She looked down at the front rows. This is why, to kick off our summer reading program, 12-year-olds will be selected to be the very first to explore the wonders awaiting inside Mr. Lemoncello's extraordinary new library. You will, of course, need your parents' permission. We have slips for you to take home. You will also need a sleeping bag, a toothbrush, and, if you please, a change of clothes. She smiled mysteriously. You might consider packing 2 pairs of underwear. Okay, thought Kyle, that's bizarre. Did the librarian really think 7th graders weren't toilet trained? There will be movies, food, fun, games, and prizes. Also, each of our 12 winners will receive a $500 gift card good toward the purchase of Lemoncello games and gizmos. Oh man, $500 worth of free games and gear? Kyle sank a little lower in his seat. The next time someone gave him an extra credit essay assignment, he'd turn it in early. And now here to announce our winners is the man behind the new library, the master gamester himself, Mr. Luigi Lemoncello. Dr. Zinchenko gestured to her left. The whole auditorium swung their heads. People were clapping and whistling and cheering, but no one came on stage. The applause petered out, and then on the opposite side of the stage, Kyle heard a very peculiar sound. It was a cross between a burp and the squeak from a squeeze toy. Who do you think it is? What do you think's happening up there? Maybe you can stop the video and talk about that a moment. Chapter 8. Over on the side of the stage, a shoe that looked like a peeled open banana appeared from behind a curtain. When it landed, the shoe burp squeaked. As the second banana shoe burp squeaked onto the floor, Kyle looked up, and there he was, Mr. Lemoncello. He had loose and floppy limbs and was dressed in a 3-piece black suit with a bright red tie. His black, broad-brimmed hat was cocked at a crooked angle atop his curly white hair. Kyle was so close he could see a sly twinkle sparkling in Mr. Lemoncello's coal-black eyes. Treading very carefully, Mr. Lemoncello walked toward the podium. The burp squeaks in his shoes seemed to change pitch depending on how hard he landed on his heels. He added a couple of little jig steps, a quick hop and a stutter step, skip, and yes, his shoes were squeaking out a song. Pop goes the weasel. On the pop, Mr. Lemoncello popped behind the podium. The crowd went wild. Mr. Lemoncello politely bowed and said very softly, thank you, grazie, grazie. He bent forward so his mouth was maybe an inch away from the microphone. Buongiorno, boys and girls. He spoke very timidly, very slowly. This is how my mama and my papa teach me to speak the English. He wiggled his ears, straightened his back. But then, he said in a crisp, clear voice, I went to the Alexandria Public Library, where a wonderful librarian named Mrs. Gail Tobin helped me learn how to speak like this. If two witches were watching two watches, which witch would watch which watch? I can also speak while upside down and underwater, but not today, because I had this suit dry cleaned and I do not want to get it wet. Mr. Lemoncello bounced across the stage like a happy grasshopper. Now then, children, if I may call you that, which I must, because I have not yet memorized all of your names, even though I am working on it, what do you think is the most amazingly incredible thing you'll find inside your new wondrous library, besides, of course, all the knowledge you need to do anything and everything you ever wanted to do? No one said anything. They were too mesmerized by Mr. Lemoncello's rat-a-tat words. Would it be A, robots silently whizzing their way through the library, restocking the shelves? B, the electronic learning center with 36 plasma screen TVs all connected to flight simulators and educational video games? Or C, the Wonder Dome? Lined with 10 giant video screens, it can make the whole building feel like a rocket ship blasting off into outer space. The game room, someone shouted. The robots, the video dome. Mr. Lemoncello raced back to the podium and made a buzzing sound into the microphone. Sorry, the correct answer is, and not just because of Winn-Dixie, D, all of the above. The crowd went wild. Mr. Lemoncello whirled around to face his head librarian. Dr. Zinchenko, will you kindly help me pass out our first 12 library cards? It was time to announce the essay contest winners. Dr. Zinchenko placed a stack of 12 shiny cards on the podium in front of Mr. Lemoncello. Please, he said, as I call your name, come join me on stage. Miguel Fernandez. Yes, Miguel jumped up out of his seat. Akimi Hughes. Woohoo! Kyle was thrilled to see his two friends be the first ones called to stage. Andrew Peckelman, Bridget Wage, Sierra Russell, Yasmin Smith-Snyder. Yasmin squealed when her name was called. Sean Keegan, Haley Daly, Rose Vermette, and Kayla Corson. 10 kids, all the same age as Kyle, were up on stage with his idol, Mr. Lemoncello. He was not. Only 2 more chances. As if reading his mind, Mr. Lemoncello said, only 2 more, and tapped a pair of library cards on the podium. Charles Chiltington. Gosh, really? He dashed up to the podium and started pumping Mr. Lemoncello's hand. Thank you, sir. Thank you. This is such an honor. Truly, I mean it. Thank you, Charles. May I have my hand back? I need it to flip over the final card. Oh, of course, sir. But I cannot wait to spend the night in your library, or as I like to call it, your Athenaeum. Because, as I said in my essay, when you open a book, you open your mind. Finally, Charles the Brown-Noser let go of Mr. Lemoncello's hand and went over to line up with the other winners. And last, but not least, said Mr. Lemoncello, Kyle Keeley! Kyle could not believe his ears. He thought he was dreaming, but then Akimi started waving for him to come on up. Dazed, Kyle made his way up the steps to join the others on stage. Mr. Lemoncello handed Kyle a library card. His name and the number 12 were printed on the front. 2 book covers, I Love You, Stinky Face, and The Napping House were on the back. Let's all pose for a picture, please, said the principal. When everybody moved into position for the photographer, Kyle found himself standing right next to Mr. Lemoncello. He swallowed hard. I'm a big fan, sir, he said, his voice kind of shaky. Why, thank you, and remind me, you are?
I'm Kyle, sir, Kyle Keeley. Ah, yes, the boy who proved what I've always known to be true. The game is never over until it's over. Bong! Boys and girls, as we read this book, you'll notice that the author put in a lot of book titles throughout the story. It's often when Mr. Lemoncello is speaking. So just see if you can find the titles of some books that maybe you know, or maybe your mom or dad know some of these books too. Chapter 9. Kyle couldn't wait to tell his family the good news. I won the essay contest. He showed them his shiny new library card. Congratulations, said his mom. Way to go, said his dad. His brothers Curtis and Mike were more interested in Kyle's other card, his $500 Lemoncello gift card. It's good for 12 months, said Kyle, but you need to use it now, said Mike. We need to go to the store tonight so you can buy me Mr. Lemoncello's kooky wacky hockey. I can't. Why not? I have to show my library card at the store to cash it in. And, I'm grounded, remember? You know, Kyle, said his dad, looking at his mother, who nodded. Since you worked extra hard and did such a bang-up job on your essay, I think we might consider suspending your punishment. Really? Really. Kyle's mom and dad smiled at him, the way they smiled whenever Mike won a football game or Curtis won the science fair. Boys and girls, how do you think that felt to Kyle? At the beginning of the book, we kind of get the idea that Kyle feels like he's not good enough in his family, or that maybe he doesn't measure up to his brothers. And it says that his mom and dad smiled at him the way they smile whenever Mike won a football game or Curtis won the science fair. I bet he was feeling a little different than normal. Perhaps you can stop the video and talk about that too. After supper, all 5 Keeleys piled into the family van and headed off to the local toy store. Lemoncello's hockey game is awesome, said Mike as they drove to the store, especially when the Penguins play the Polar Bears. I'm hoping to find a classic board game, mused Curtis. Mr. Lemoncello's bewilderingly baffling bibliomania. Is that about the Bible? Asked their dad from behind the wheel. Not exactly, said Curtis, although the Bible, especially a rare Gutenberg edition, may be one of the treasures you must find and collect, because the object of the game is to collect rare and valuable books by... The Penguins in kooky wacky hockey aren't from Pittsburgh like in the NHL, said Mike, cutting off Curtis. They're from Antarctica. And the Polar Bears, they're from Alaska. Kyle had decided to divvy up his gift card 5 ways, to give everybody, including his mom and dad, $100 to play with. As soon as they entered the toy store, the family split up, cruising the aisles with their own shopping carts. His mom was going to upgrade to Mr. Lemoncello's Restaurant Rush. His dad was looking for one of Mr. Lemoncello's complicated what-if historical games. What if the Romans had won the American Civil War? Kyle hung with Curtis and Mike for a while. Being the one with the gift card made him feel like he was suddenly their big brother. Mike quickly found his PlayStation hockey game, and Curtis was in geek heaven when he finally found Bibliomania. They only have one left, he gushed, tearing off the cellophane shrink wrap and prying open the lid. He sat down right in the middle of the store and unfolded the game board onto his lap. You see, you start under the rotunda in this circular reading room. Then you go upstairs and enter each of these 10 chambers where you have to answer a question about a book. I think I hear Mom calling me, said Kyle. She must need the gift card. Enjoy! And Kyle took off. The store will close in 15 minutes, announced a voice from the ceiling speakers. Kyle flew up and down the aisles and grabbed a couple of board games he didn't own yet, including Mr. Lemoncello's absolutely incredible Iron Horse, a game where you build your own transcontinental railroad, complete with locomotive game pieces that actually puff steam. Reminds me of the game called Ticket to Ride. As Kyle was doing some quick math to see if he'd spent his $100, Charles Chiltington rolled up the aisle with a cart crammed full with $500 worth of loot. Games stacked on top of games were practically spilling over the sides. Mr. Lemoncello's phenomenal picture word puzzler, one of Kyle's favorites, was teetering on the top.
"Hello, Keeley,"
said Chiltington with a smirk. He looked down at the 3 games sitting in the bottom of Kyle's shopping cart.
"Just getting started?"
"No, I shared my gift card with my family."
"Really? Well, that was a mistake, wasn't it?"
Kyle was about to answer when Chiltington said, "So long, see you Friday." Kyle wasn't 100% sure, but Charles must have also muttered, "Loser." Since the store was about to close, Kyle headed toward the checkout lanes. When he passed the customer service department, he saw Haley Daly. "No," Kyle heard Haley say in a hushed tone to the clerk working in the returns window. "I do not want to return these items for store credit. I would prefer cash." Kyle finally found his family, showed the cashier his library card, and paid for everything with a single swipe of his gift card. "You know, Kyle," said his dad as the family walked across the parking lot, "your mother and I are extremely proud of you. Writing a good essay isn't easy." "Maybe you'll be an author someday," added his mom. "Then you could write books that will be on the shelves of the new library." "Thanks, little brother," said Curtis, practically hugging his bibliomania box. "Yeah," said Mike, "this was awesome. Way to win one for the team." "Best family game night ever," joked their dad. Kyle was enjoying his rare moment of glory, playing Santa Claus for his whole family. As the week dragged on, Friday night and the library lock-in started to remind Kyle of Christmas too. It felt like they would never come. Then, finally, they did. All right, we'll stop there for today, and then we will find out when Friday comes in the book what happens as Kyle heads to the library lock-in. Have an awesome afternoon, guys, or night, whenever you're listening to this story. See you later. Bye-bye.